They won't tell you this at therapy, not your productivity coach, not even your mindfulness app. But the human mind, your mind, was never designed to digest 10,000 inputs a day. In the Appalachian backwoods, an old tradition endures. Men disappear into the forest for 3 days. No tools, no talk, no noise. Not as punishment, but as medicine. Because sometimes the only way to come back to life is to walk away from it. This video is about that walk away. Intentional withdrawal. Not escape, not isolation, but a wise, deliberate pause from the noise. We're going to explore how stepping back isn't weakness, it's precision. It's how extreme minimalists reset their nervous system, restore mental clarity, and rebuild emotional resilience. And if you've been feeling frayed, overstimulated, or lost in modern noise, you're not broken. You're just too connected. Let's begin. In the deepest chambers of the human brain lies a rhythm, quiet, ancient, and utterly forgotten. It doesn't hum with urgency. It doesn't scream for attention. It waits. And when the noise of modern life finally stops, it begins to stir. This is the rhythm of recovery. An intentional withdrawal, when done with clarity and not out of collapse, is the only way to hear it again. In the age of hyperstimulation, the human nervous system has been stretched thin. Notifications tap the spine, screens flicker like 1,000 false suns, and every spare moment is colonized by content. What we call normal life is actually a prolonged state of low-grade emergency. The body interprets it as threat, and the mind, it starts to fracture into fragments. Shortened attention spans, persistent anxiety, a background hum of fatigue. This is not laziness or weakness. It is overstimulation fatigue, a crisis of no stillness. But something extraordinary happens when you withdraw. Not out of despair, but design. It begins quietly. You cancel plans, turn off the phone, perhaps even leave the room mid-conversation, not rudely, but with reverence. And then comes the tremble, the urge to fill the silence. That's the detox. That's the nervous system beginning to uncoil. Science now confirms what ancient traditions practiced without needing proof. When you reduce inputs, the parasympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for rest, digestion, and repair, begins to dominate. Your breathing slows, cortisol levels drop, sleep deepens, and in that fertile quiet, the mind doesn't just rest, it reorganizes. There's a quiet rebellion in reclaiming your attention, not by productivity hacks or breath-counting apps, but by withdrawing entirely for hours or even days. Extreme minimalism teaches this as a ritual, a space clearing, not just of stuff, but of stimulation, of social obligations, of emotional entanglement. Withdrawal becomes the strategy, not the surrender. A deliberate closing of doors so that the right ones may open within. And somewhere in that silence, between the ticking of an unburdened clock, the nervous system begins its quiet rebuilding, cell by cell, breath by breath. And you return to yourself. There's a peculiar kind of heaviness that most people carry without ever noticing. It isn't made of stone or steel. It's made of messages left on read, group chats that never end, meetings that drain more than they give, and the expectation to be constantly reachable. We call it connection, but beneath the surface, it often behaves like a leash. Intentional withdrawal challenges this weight. It doesn't reject relationships or dismiss community. Rather, it asks a more precise question. At what cost does this connection come? Every ping, every glance at a screen, every passing obligation to respond, these aren't free. They cost micro amounts of your energy, your focus, your mental bandwidth. Left unchecked, they siphon the very core of your clarity. Solitude isn't a luxury, it's a lost necessity. In pre-industrial societies, people regularly withdrew, not to wallow, but to recalibrate. Native American tribes honored the concept of sacred solitude, where an individual would step away not in shame or exile, but in quiet reverence, to process, to realign, to return stronger. The modern mind has erased this ritual. Instead, we associate solitude with loneliness, withdrawal with avoidance, and silence with something to be filled. But this is backwards. Extreme minimalism reframes solitude not as isolation, but as sanctuary. A spaciousness where your thoughts are no longer competing for space, where your emotions can finally catch up. In solitude, without commentary or interruption, you begin to recognize your own voice again. Not the borrowed beliefs, not the algorithm-fed urges, but the real, quiet self that rarely gets a word in. And this has a profound effect on your mental health. Your emotional regulation sharpens. You gain perspective that can't be accessed in noise. Decisions become more rooted. You stop reacting and start choosing, not out of impulse, but out of presence. Connection isn't bad, but unchecked connection is heavy. Intentional withdrawal helps you learn the weight of what you carry. And when you lay it down, even for a moment, you begin to move differently, not just lighter, but clearer. Silence isn't just an absence of sound. It's a full-spectrum medicine, a balm for minds that are blistered by noise. Not just the external clamor of traffic, chatter, and headlines, but the inner barrage too. Looping thoughts, rehearsed conversations, endless to-do lists. And while we often think of fasting in terms of food, few consider the urgent need for noise fasting, an intentional abstinence from stimulation itself. In an average urban day, the brain is exposed to more stimuli than an entire lifetime in pre-modern cultures. From the moment we wake, the mind is bombarded, scrolling through images, reacting to news, decoding messages, processing ads, remembering names, and filtering sounds. This isn't multitasking. It's microtrauma. The brain, deprived of rest, doesn't sharpen, it scatters. Focus fractures. Emotions dull or intensify unpredictably, and the baseline becomes tension. Intentional withdrawal, through the practice of noise fasting, becomes a kind of internal cleanse. No screens, no conversations, no music, just space. And in that space, a remarkable thing happens. Your mind begins to decelerate. Thoughts stretch out. Sensory awareness heightens. Emotions that had been compressed by overstimulation begin to rise. Not to torment you, but to exit. It's uncomfortable at first, like any detox. But then, something clicks. The silence no longer feels empty. It feels whole. The Japanese concept of ma, the space between things, is central to this practice. They believe beauty is not in the notes, but in the pause between them. In Western culture, we've lost that reverence. We fear pauses, fill them, run from them. But the minimalist understands this. Space is not a void. It is a vessel. When you strip away the excess noise, what remains is attention, presence, conscious breath, a return to now. Noise fasting isn't about becoming a monk or retreating forever. It's about giving your mind the silence it was evolutionarily built for. A brief, sacred intermission from performance and pressure. And when you return to the world, even the same old noises sound different, not louder, but quieter, because now you are no longer echoing them inside. There's a strange paradox within the human heart. We crave clarity, emotional, mental, spiritual, yet we surround ourselves with noise, clutter, and constant input, all of which blur the very truth we seek. Emotional clarity doesn't arrive through more information. It emerges when the unnecessary is stripped away. And intentional withdrawal is the tool that sharpens that emergence. Every day, you absorb fragments of other people's emotions through conversations, social media, news cycles, even casual encounters. Slowly, almost invisibly, your inner landscape gets painted with borrowed colors. Someone else's anxiety becomes your background tension, their urgency, your false momentum. It becomes nearly impossible to separate your emotions from the ones you've absorbed. This emotional cross-contamination is silent but corrosive. Intentional withdrawal, when practiced with purpose and not as escapism, offers a clearing, a return to your own emotional fingerprint. It's in this space that the sediment begins to settle. And like a lake, when the surface finally stills, what lies beneath becomes visible. In solitude and silence, you begin to recognize what you're actually feeling, not what you're expected to feel, not what you've been conditioned to express, but what is genuinely present. the grief you mistook for fatigue, the resentment hiding behind politeness, the deep peace you never noticed because it was drowned in noise. These revelations don't require a therapist's couch or a self-help book. They require room, stillness, and most of all, honesty. Extreme minimalists speak often of reducing emotional clutter. But this isn't about becoming stoic in the cold sense. It's about building emotional intelligence through subtraction, not addition. When there are fewer inputs, there is more internal space to notice, process, and resolve. Clarity isn't found in doing more. It's revealed by needing less. This is not quick work, but it is enduring. Because once you've tasted emotional truth in its unfiltered form, you'll no longer be seduced by the noise of surface-level fixes. Withdrawal gives you that access. A return to your own emotional compass. Not as a luxury, but as a necessity for mental health, resilience, and personal evolution. Strip away the job title, the curated online presence, the daily obligations, and the well-meaning expectations others place upon you. And what's left? It's a question most people never dare to answer, because the scaffolding of modern identity is built outward, not inward. But intentional withdrawal, when embraced as a conscious practice, dismantles that scaffolding, not to destroy the self, but to rebuild it with greater honesty. Every role we play, employee, partner, parent, achiever, becomes a mirror reflecting how others see us. Over time, those reflections begin to dictate how we see ourselves. Success becomes a performance. Worth becomes a scoreboard. Even peace is pursued performatively, photographed, and posted. But in solitude, those mirrors go dark. And in their absence, you're left with something far more revealing, your unedited self. This withdrawal isn't comfortable. It removes the applause, the feedback loop, the external markers of relevance. It can feel like vanishing. But it's in this vanishing that something ancient begins to reappear, a version of you that isn't trying to win, impress, or belong. Just be. Indigenous traditions across the world have long held rites of passage involving solitary retreat, not to punish, but to clarify. In the stillness of mountains, deserts, forests, young men and women would meet their raw identity, not the one given to them, but the one that emerged in silence. Today, we lack these rituals, but the need remains. Extreme minimalism honors this need. It recognizes that the clutter isn't only on our shelves, it's in our self-perception. When you remove the need to be seen, liked, or affirmed, what surfaces is an identity rooted not in performance, but in presence. This is how confidence is rebuilt, not loud, but quiet, not reactive, but grounded. When you withdraw intentionally, you don't become less of yourself. You become less of what the world has projected onto you. And in that absence, you remember what it feels like to belong to yourself, not as a role, not as a brand, but as a whole, aware, unedited being. Withdrawal is not an escape. It is a deliberate pause, a sacred interval between the chaos you left behind and the life you're about to reclaim. But the true power of intentional withdrawal lies not just in stepping away, but in how you step back in. The reentry is where transformation becomes real. After days or even hours of silence, your senses feel sharper. Your mind, no longer fogged with distraction, moves with renewed clarity. Emotions that once felt overwhelming now settle into perspective. But this fragile clarity is also vulnerable. Without care, it can be lost, quickly overwhelmed by old patterns, habits, and expectations. This is why the art of reentry matters. It is not about plunging back into the noise, but choosing what you let in and when. It means returning gently, like a river meandering back to the sea, not a flood washing away the banks. You bring with you the calm you cultivated, the space you carved out, the lessons of your solitude. And with that, you set boundaries, prioritize what aligns with your core, and let go of what no longer serves. Historical accounts from contemplative traditions tell of seekers who would spend weeks in retreat, only to return and spend months reintegrating their insights into daily life. The process was slow, deliberate, and compassionate. Modern life rarely grants us such grace, but the principle remains vital. The value of withdrawal is lost without mindful return. Extreme minimalism embraces this rhythm: withdrawal, reflection, reentry, as a continuous dance. It is not a one-time reset, but a lifelong practice. With each cycle, you build resilience, deepen your mental health, and sharpen your intentional living. The world remains chaotic, but you no longer bend beneath its weight. Instead, you move through it with a quiet strength born from having stepped back and touched your center. Intentional withdrawal is not surrender, it is mastery, a radical reclaiming of your mental space. And when you return, you do so whole, present, and profoundly free. The journey of intentional withdrawal is not a retreat from life, but a return to its deepest, clearest parts. In a world that constantly demands more attention, more connection, more noise, choosing to step back is an act of profound courage and wisdom. It is how you reclaim your mental health, rebuild your inner resilience, and rediscover the power of living deliberately. As you begin to practice this radical pause, remember that true transformation takes time. Each moment of stillness, each quiet breath, layers upon the last, weaving a tapestry of calm and clarity that no external chaos can unravel. This is extreme minimalism in its most vital form, less not just in things, but in noise, obligation, and distraction. If this exploration resonates with you, I encourage you to dive deeper into the ideas of slowing down, creating space, and living intentionally. Explore the other playlists on this channel, where themes of mindful living, personal growth, and the subtle art of simplicity come alive in different ways. Discover how the philosophy behind Microtopia and the rhythms of the hollow era offer fresh perspectives to help you live more fully and freely. Your path to mental clarity is waiting. Take the next step and let these stories guide you toward a life less cluttered, more meaningful, and profoundly your own.